Hello, everyone. I'm very happy that you've come, and I hope you enjoy the talk. I'll do my best to make it amusing, if nothing else, and informative too. So, The Rise of the Diva on the 16th century Commedia dell'arte stage explores the emergence of the professional actress from the 1560s onward in Italy. This phenomenal cultural event that allowed women to appear on the professional stage for the first time in Western history is still not common knowledge, even though it occurred more than 100 years before England allowed women to act professionally. My talk will highlight key moments that mark the appearance of the first professional actresses as sexual, commodity, and celebrity fetishes as they circulate the desire that kept audiences coming back for almost 200 years. In the slide, that's the opening slide as well, you see, this is an unknown artist who's copying a Callow print that actually could have come from a Commedia performance. And the title is La Signora Lucia and Trastulo. And Trastulo is obviously a Zani. And you can see the fetish very much at work here as Lucia is forcing him to kiss her shoe. And he's kneeling, and he's also proffering this hat to her, a very feathery hat. And in the other iterations of this portrait, there's a great deal of sort of emphasis on sexual exchange happening, even though the Zani is very much at her service. So I will show how their presence on stage allowed them, the actresses, to speak back from their position as sexualized objects to express subjective desires in their performances of both female and transvestite character roles. Above all, I will describe the process that made a whole new class of actresses into divas, who created a marketing revolution as theater artists whose ability to offer their audiences an illusory sense of shared intimacy and availability made them irresistible to the masses. Having to consider what it meant to have real women taking not only the female, but the transvestite roles as they did on the Italian professional stage enriches our knowledge about theatrical practice and challenges some of the dominant assumptions about the performance of sexual identities in early modern Europe. In tracing the historical progression of the actress's materialization from her earliest appearance as a slideshow attraction to a revered diva, I show how the actress's performances interrogate early modern female sexual identities and how the most gifted stratum of actresses achieve celebrity status. This early appearance of celebrity culture, considered to be an 18th century phenomenon in the English theater, was accelerated in Italy by the early arrival of the actress. By locating their unprecedented popularity within the context of celebrity worship, it becomes possible to understand how their iconic status changed the acting profession and the importance accorded to women within it. The extensive archive left by the first great international diva, Isabella Andreini, provides the material to authenticate her celebrity status and reveals ways in which she queried the boundaries defining male and female roles. And in this slide, you see here, it's a very, very famous picture. I'll be back looking at it later, but you actually see an early Commedia troupe who are performing in France at the time. And so this is even in the 1570s. So you can see they were already operating very widely and successfully. Normally there would be another prima donna or a seconda donna with her. There are 3 women and usually 7 men in a troupe. But that's the sort of standard, very, very famous group showing the different members. My research builds on the evidence that the addition of the actress to the previously all-male troupes established in the 1540s was the marketing device that ensured the commercial success of the struggling new form of professional theater. What emerges from the documents is a strong sense of the church's awareness that the new commercial theatrical form posed a serious threat to the centrality of religious worship in the lives of the people. The expansion of the period of Carnival, when theatrical entertainments were permitted, so that the Comedia Del Arte eventually was able to perform all year round, signaled that theater had become a popular attraction in early modern Italy. And this is again a famous engraving. showing Carnival in 1611 in St. Mark's Square. And if you look carefully, you'll see there's a Pantalone and a Zanni there, but there are all sorts of other performers. And I think possibly a woman on the stage, also transvestite performers. So this was a very common scene. Looking at a larger global development, this loss of belief in the sacred led to the rise of what Simon During describes as secular magic. In order to experience the supernatural that had once been part of religious belief systems, people turned to the secular magic found in stage illusions, conjuring tricks, and special effects to fill the void. During's important study helps to explain the watershed moment that was taking place as the loss of religious faith left the populace with a new taste for secular entertainments that could be satisfied by the new commercial theater, with its mixture of acrobatics, conjuring tricks, enchantments, displays of madness, all woven into a dramatic fiction. Offered as a consumable leisure product, the magical effects that theatrical entertainment exerted over audiences led church officials to regard it with a kind of deep suspicion and unresolved ambivalence that is usually attached to a fetish object. The concept of the fetish's ambiguous value and irreducible materiality proves useful when applied to the novel display of female bodies on the Comedia Del Arte stage. The fetish, beyond its status as a significant object, evokes an intensely personal response from individuals. Especially pertinent here is the Church's condemnation of women's bodies as more dangerous than men's because of their innately sinful materiality. The anti-theatricalist commentary captures the Church's dismay not only at the controversial display of women's bodies, but also their fears about the demonic effects of seeing women perform. Women's bodies also operated as commodity fetishes, since they were used in advertising, marketing, and packaging of Commedia dell'arte for mass audiences. As the actress proved to be the biggest selling point to bring audiences in to watch the theatrical entertainment, her commodification was also closely tied to her sexual appeal. This marketing of sex has been defined as a form of consumer fetishism of the erotic, as we will see in the next slide. So here we have a Zanni and a female entertainer who is there to add class to the act by wearing elegant clothing and playing a musical instrument. The Zanni also has a product to sell. You can see that he's about to flog to the audience. But this is very, very common, and often the female entertainer is flirting with other members who are on the stage with her. In the next slide, 5, you see clearly how the entertainment leads to a commercial transaction by the spectators, who are invited to throw their handkerchiefs with coins inside to pay for the precious secret potion that the mountebank charlatan has pitched to them. Once the money has been received, the tin with the potion was wrapped in a handkerchief and thrown back out to the purchaser. Typically, audience members who had not fallen for the entertainment often bought the product so that they could throw their handkerchiefs at the women's faces and breasts. You can see the handkerchiefs flying around in the air. It was not uncommon for the women on the stage to add a little note saying where they could be met after the show for an assignation. Becoming a universalized object of desire for her audiences, the female entertainers participate in a magic moment of fetish formation where their sexual desirability and commercial exchangeability are conflated through their stage appearance. This new emphasis on female sexuality, which Freud would make so famous later, has been recognized by historians as starting as early as the 16th century. Freud's description of the formation of the fetish as a process whereby all women become phallicized objects in the eyes of men proves useful in exposing the different ways in which sexual differences are constructed through stage representations of female others. The obsessive desire of the male character to pursue female characters and their ever-present fear of being cuckolded and exposed as lacking is a driving theme in most commedia plots. In slide 6, we see a naked courtesan emptying a chamber pot out of the window, aimed at her departing clients, Pantalone and Zanni. And this is from these famous wall paintings that cover 3 flights of stairs in this in Trausnitz's castle that was for a wedding celebration. It's the first recorded commedia performance. A woodcut from the Recueil Faussard in the next slide shows Harlequin trying to pleasure Franceschina with Pantalone watching. And if I had the translations for the verses underneath, you know that everybody knows exactly what they're doing. The often pornographic exposure of the maidservant's body is juxtaposed to the apparent unobtainability of the prima donna, the classic Petrarchan love object. Can we have, yeah. And so here we're back looking at probably the very young Isabella Andreini. And you can see, actually, she's not contrasted to a maid being over-sexualized in this particular one, but she herself is showing her incredible sexual power and unobtainability. And if you look at her posturing, her left hand, which is usually associated with matters of the heart, but also of sexuality, is over her heart and her bodice, and her right hand holding her gloves with her fingers crossed. And she's obviously up to no good and is trying to trick probably Pantalone and has lovers on the side. So she's letting us know that she's playing the game carefully, but she is looks unassailable. In breaking the taboo against women appearing in public spaces, they acquired a certain notoriety that is reflected by the fact that the public called them by their first names or by the first names of the characters they typically play. Over time, as they traveled around the major Italian cities, they became known to mass audiences and revered alongside the outstanding male actors who had first developed the famous masks of Pantalone, Dottore, and the Zannis. The sense of public intimacy created by the actresses when they appeared on stage, dressed in the beautiful and often revealing borrowed robes of the court lady, gave their spectators the illusion that they were accessible and at the same time out of reach by being on stage. This illusion of availability, derived from their public intimacy, is the first quality that a celebrity must possess, according to Joseph Roach in his study of the rise of celebrity on the 18th century English stage. In pushing back this date to look for evidence of the appearance of celebrities on the 16th century Italian stage, I acknowledge that the media records are not available in the same abundance, but note that print culture had already made significant changes to the production and reception of theater. The Comedia Del Arte troupes were very much a part of this revolution that positioned themselves to collect printed materials for their repertoires, hire themselves out to court patrons, and charge audiences to see them. As the troupes became known throughout Italy, their members acquired celebrity status in the popular imagination, not only by word of mouth, but also by iconographic representations and the circulation of print materials. The actresses, alongside the outstanding male performers, acquired the status of role icons, defined as larger-than-life persona of abnormal interest, who through the power of mass marketing have come to stand in for abstracted qualities. Sociologist Chris Rojak's important study, Celebrity, explains that in a secular society which has lost its connection to the sacred, celebrities often become objects of cult worship, inspiring intense feelings of recognition, awe, and wonder. Both in life and in death, it is possible to relate these concepts to ways in which certain actresses, such as Isabella Andreini, were regarded. Indeed, the worship accorded to them is not dissimilar from Roland Barthes' tribute to Greta Garbo's ineffable iconic qualities. In discussing her mythic powers to enchant, Barthes observed, "The name given to her, the divine, probably aimed to convey less a superlative state of beauty than the essence of her corporeal person, descended from heaven, where all things are formed and finished with the greatest clarity." Following public intimacy, the next essential quality that Roach lists as a requirement is synthetic experience, the way in which audiences share vicariously in the actor's embodiment of actions and feelings. And on the next slide that you see here, I've added in the it effect, which we'll now go on to explain as well, but you've already heard of public intimacy and synthetic experience. Noting that theatrical performances provide audiences with a magical, consumable product that satisfies our human need to live vicariously, he stresses the new importance that attending the theater acquired once audience members had the opportunity to pay for the experience. Comedia dell'arte audiences also experience theatrical performances as paying customers, and were possibly more directly implicated in vicariously experiencing the actors' performances, since the improvised nature of the action required them to collaborate in shaping the course of events. Even more than in scripted performances, audience members found themselves closely identified with the actors, who appealed to them in direct and indirect ways to support their choices and share their emotional dilemmas. When reconstructing scenarios, this strong interaction between the actresses and their audiences plays out as the scenario unfolds. The third and most important quality, the it effect, personality-driven mass attraction, is one of the definitions, is much harder to pin down, since it defies exact measurement and can never be reduced to simply beauty or talent. The best explanation for the fame that was attributed to Isabella Andreini and the other early divas lies in their exceptionality as female artists. Their celebrity was achieved, which means it was derived from the perceived accomplishment of the individual in open competition. In other words, it wasn't inherited and it wasn't just bestowed on them because other people had it. They actually had to achieve it. Since the Comedia del Arte prided itself on its unique improvisational style, all its company members had to display the utmost skill in performing in order to carry the action of the scenario forward. In the case of the prima and seconda donnas, this involved displaying their virtuosity on stage by showing how well they could effortlessly perform as trained singers, musicians, dancers, and rhetoricians, declaiming Neoplatonic discourses. Since they always appeared in pairs as second prima and seconda donnas, rivaling one another, there was a constant basis for comparison for whose performance was better. The famous rivalries that developed between the most celebrated early divas, such as Barbara Flaminia and Vincenza Armani and Vittoria Piissimi and Isabella Andreini, moved the competition to a national scale, as these actresses came from different parts of Italy and vied with each other for top honors. Since we are unable to fathom the magical ways in which artists transform the materials they work with, we come to grant them supernatural powers and see them and their art through a kind of halo effect. Our desire for these truly valuable objects stems from the fact that we know they have a transcendent quality, much like Walter Benjamin's description of the aura, the singular qualities of the original work of art, highly valued but deceptive and out of reach. It is this erratic quality that Michael Quinn draws on in Celebrity and the Semiotics of Acting, as he explains the transcendent effects that occur because of the illusion of the absolute presence that celebrities are granted by their audiences. Quinn's analysis provides valuable insights into the effects that the first divas performances had on their audiences. In understanding how the early actresses can be read as having achieved celebrity status, the question as to what kinds of desire they were mobilizing in the public becomes easier to answer. While some cultural sociologists insist that celebrity icons exist independently of the material conditions that produce them, I align myself more closely with others, such as Chris Rojek, who maintains that celebrity culture is inextricably bound up with commodity culture, and that celebrities are commodities in the sense that consumers desire to possess them. I argue that recognizing that commodity fetishism is part of celebrity culture, rather than being reductive, opens up the opportunity to look for additional ways in which the actresses made their commodification work for them, by revealing places where their desires and knowledge intersect. As Rojek sets it out, capitalism requires consumers to develop an abstract desire for commodities that can never be satisfied if the market is to keep expanding, and therefore is well served by celebrity figures who, as animate objects, embody desire in ways that allow for deeper levels of attachment and identification than inanimate objects do. As such, celebrities, like the divas, humanize desire. Since the Comedia dell'arte developed the romantic comedy around the resolution of Oedipal family conflicts, with a focus on mobilizing desire for the marriageable upper-class heroine, actresses performing the prima and seconda donna roles were positioned to understand themselves both as desirable objects and desiring subjects. If the actresses mobilized the desires of the public for the idealized Petrarchan love object on stage, they were also aware that their desirability was enhanced by their ability to show off their skill as artists. This kind of self-reflexivity exhibited by the actresses thus included not only their expressions of the desires of the characters they were playing, but also of their creative choices in performing them to consciously respond to the desires of the audience who were watching them. Their performances teased the audience because of the tensions between their sexual sophistication through their honest courtesan training as eloquent, learned, and witty, but also capable of debate, deception, and flattery in playing the silent, chaste Petrarchan beloved. Such tensions no doubt eroticized their performances by referencing their acting abilities as well as their courtesan roots. Nowhere does their skill in manipulating the desires of the audience play out more than in their performances of the transvestite heroine. More transgressive than the prima donna roles, the actresses who performed the transvestite page roles challenged the sex-gender boundaries that privileged male over female identities with their skill as male impersonators. Female transvestism remained closely associated with the courtesan practice of wearing men's breeches. Here, Cesare Vicello describes the Venetian prostitute's common practice of wearing a somewhat masculine outfit, silk or cloth waistcoats adorned with conspicuous fringes and padded like young men's vests, especially those of Frenchmen. Next to their bodies, they wear a man's shirt. Many of them wear men's breeches, and one instantly recognizes them for what they are because of these trousers and certain little round pieces of silver they use as ornaments. It has also been argued that the courtesan in men's clothing enhanced her sexual appeal by her very ambiguity. The well-known 1590 engraving showing a fashionable Venetian courtesan wearing a full-length gown which is lifted up to reveal that she is wearing men's breeches underneath focuses all the attention on her large laced-up padded genital area where Cupid's dart is aimed. And that was a common postcard in circulation at the time. And so I will invite you all back to my second lecture on February the 11th, where we will really go into how the transvestite status changed their whole ability to play back and forth across the genders. So we'll leave that for now. Recent scholarship in Italy has come closer to admitting that the honest courtesan class was more closely linked to the famous actresses than previously claimed. This is not to blacken their reputations for having patrons and admirers, but to build the connection with the kind of superior educations that courtesans received in both the fine arts and in rhetoric and oratory. It also intensifies the knowledge that the actresses had about their self-awareness, about their sexual powers as commodities and artists. Pictorial evidence suggests that the virtuous and chaste Isabella Andreini was able to capitalize on her courtesan connections. A recently identified portrait of Isabella Andreini by Veronese, and you have that on your screens, captures her special attributes as a famous performer while alluding to her courtesan similarities. Her beautiful, noble face, pensive gaze, short, curly golden hair, simplicity of dress, which is nonetheless very fine, unadorned with jewelry, makes her hard to identify as a member of a known social group. But yes, you need to look at the picture below here to get her full body. But the presence of the little dog operates both as a fashion accessory and as a reminder of the animal world. Also note the little book, probably a Petrarchino connected with refined learning and also something every actress had to have. If the portrait recognizes Andreini's greatness as an actress, it also references her transvestite association with the courtesan in its V-shaped front opening and overskirt parted at the waist and a bodice that is cut like a man's doublet. And that's because she often played transvestite roles and needed a costume that could do that. So again, similarities have been different and differences have been noted in the way Andreini is portrayed to the poet Veronica Franco, who's ultra famous and could do it all. She was definitely a courtesan and a model of understanding the nature of love, but she was also very, very intelligent and educated and cultured. And you see the differences in their outfits in that Andreini has the same short curly hair, which is not typical of the standard sort of respectable woman, but also she doesn't have the pearls or the open bodice. And you'll also notice that Veronica Franco, and it's typical of courtesans, usually has part of their breast showing, a nipple. So Andreini has sort of, she's shown to have similarities, but also to be very different. So she's combined her artistry into being an actress as opposed to being a courtesan. So the fame attributed to Andreini in comparison to other actresses of her time comes not only from the range of her accomplishments, but also from the records that establish her as authentic. Celebrity theorist Richard Dyer argues that a star's charisma depends on the public having knowledge of her offstage existence as an authentic flesh and blood mortal. It is only by knowing that there's a living person behind the superhuman figure of the celebrity that the public can authenticate her fame. Andreini's authentic offstage existence included being known as a devoted wife and mother, a scholar, a poet, a member of the Intenti Academy, a playwright, musician, and author, and as such kept in the public eye, both through her own self-promotion and by her husband's and sons and devoted fans and colleagues' carefully orchestrated praise, both during her life and after her death. As part of this rhetoric, it is possible to discover traces of her personal voice as she negotiates the competing and contradictory definitions of her own significance as a celebrity sign, which is one of the definitions of what a celebrity does. We know her best through her great successes in creating a range of unforgettable stage roles and personae and in transforming the stage by doing so. Her stage career included being prima donna and company director of the Gelossi from the 1580s to 1604, playing the nymph role of Fili, the prima donna Isabella, and the male page Fabrizio in the Scala scenarios, the mad woman in La Pazzia d'Isabella at the Medici court wedding gala in 1589, Aminta and other male roles in pastorals and tragedies, as well as a wide range of roles at the French court in 1602 to 4. And the slide you're seeing there, a frontispiece of her pastoral La Martilla in 1588, and she's in her early 20s. And I also want you to note as we go through all the different frontispieces of pictures of her, how her hair changes, because that's supposed to be a very diva-ish thing as well. I'm just throwing that out. So as the only pastoral written by a female performer, its scenography and musical scoring is striking in most of the scenes being enacted and often sung for maximum theatrical effect. Featuring 3 strong female protagonists, the play flips the traditional trope of the near rape of the helpless but coy maiden by the savage satyr. Fili, whom Andreini played, ties up and humiliates Satiro, going as far to play the dominatrix, as she reverses all the usual cruel acts experienced when women are assaulted. When she leaves him still tied up at the end, she is clear to state that she's just letting him know how women feel when they're attacked. Her flip is necessary to save her life, but she also gets to speak to the connections between power and violence and the thrill of being in control. Andreini's proto-feminist voice comes through many times in Martilla, as the female protagonists are the dominant voices who agree to a draw in their singing contest. And in the case of the third nymph, Ardelia, chooses to fall in love with herself and celebrate her own beauty. And the next slide, which is her poetry, is to the frontispiece of the first volume of her poetry. Andreini's proficiency in writing in many different poetic genres won her the respect of various academies, including the famous Intenti, who made her a member in 1601. It is possible to discern her relationship with many learned members who exchanged poems with her, several describing her great gifts as a performer and scholar. In her opening sonnet, she made a personal statement describing herself as an artist who was self-reflexively aware of her compositional techniques, for improvising her roles according to the rules she had learned from both nature and art. Noting that she could play both male and female roles with equal ease, she bragged about her ability to fool everyone with her vast range of emotional responses that allowed her to pull in her audiences. And now for her Lettere, published posthumously in 1607, the collection of mostly 150 Neoplatonic discourses on love written for both female and male positions and adapted from her stage performances became so popular that they were the third most popular model for writing courtly love letters in France in the 17th century. And second were Eloise and Abelard. And I can't remember the first one, but it was very impressive to find that out. In 1617, another volume of her stage dialogues appeared, taken from performances which also showed both sides of the conversation and gave female voices superior or equal wit. By the time Andreini met her early death at 42, when she miscarried her 8th child in Lyon on the way back from performing in Paris for 2 years, she had achieved a level of fame in the public mind that led to her having a funeral celebration that resembled Princess Diana's, as the whole town of Lyon turned themselves inside out to honor her in a state burial in the cathedral chapel. And after she was dead, these coins were struck either in Lyon or France for her. And you can see that at this stage, she's seeking eternal fame, which is written on her acting one, and she has now morphed into a Roman goddess. Andreini and her fellow actresses changed the face of early modern European theater by expressing their subjective desires as maidservants and prima donnas who understood their identities in the context of the new family organization supporting mercantile capitalism. Those of them who became divas in charge of expressing their own desires and reflecting those of their audiences, they challenged the limits imposed on female sexual identities. Proficient in playing female characters, they also were capable of breaking the confines restricting the female sex to an inferior position. As such, they proved, and this is a quote, that divas are about troubling and breaking out of their proper culturally assigned sex, gender, sexuality class. They had to constantly reinvent themselves in order to fulfill the endless desire that they must evoke in their devoted fans. Isabella Andreini led the way, but there were many others. Thank you very much.